Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cocktail Hour Fantasy Football Podcast presented by the Face Off Sports Network. Today is a very, very special day. I have Kevin Coleman joining me today, one of my favorite guys on Twitter, the nicest guy, but he also is Devy Royale, the fantasy football guys. He comes at you. He's bringing all you that Devy content, that Dynasty content. It's fantastic to have you my friend. How's it going this morning?
Oh, it's going great, man. Glad I could hop on and chop it up with you a little bit. And then we can talk about, I think, people are afraid to talk about running backs right now in Dynasty. So I'm excited about it because people don't want to have their takes out there. They don't want to be wrong.
Oh man, this Dynasty fantasy football managers hate running backs, and I'm kind of one of those guys too myself. I am a massive ageist at the running back position, so we'll chop it up today. I'm excited. I was joking with Kevin before this, and my listeners are usually used to me joking a little bit about the fact that I am not feeling so fresh on these Sunday morning podcasts, slinging cocktails all weekend. But this talking fantasy football is like a shot of espresso, so we will dive right into it here. So the first guy is not a big surprise. Why do we have Bijan Robinson before he's even played a game? Why is he the Dynasty RB1?
Well, I mean, I think market dictates that, right? Like when you're looking at just how he's getting valued right now. I mean, but it is extremely rare for this. Like this is the first time. I mean, Saquon, these other guys that we've seen, like we haven't seen this value place. I think the landing spot, the talent, everything kind of just fell in line for him. 3 down back, playing in Arthur Smith's system, and you've seen what he's been able to do. Derrick Henry, over 2,000 yards. Tyler Algier, like people don't talk about this. Tyler Algier was an okay prospect, but he was out there juking like car salesman now at BYU. Like it wasn't like he was like that guy, that elite guy, and he had over 1,000 yards with him, right? So like, and I think just everything that like you would look for into a volume dynasty guy, Bijan fits that, and even then. Like overall, when you're talking about Bijan Robinson, like, Breece is probably running back 2 consensus right now in Dynasty. It depends on like what rankings you look at. And he tore his ACL. So Bijan's not going to lose value, right? So like, I think that's the other thing with him. Like he could be like the Dynasty running back 1 for the next 3 or 4 years, injury with notwithstanding. And you're like, wow, yeah, he's going to hold that value. And I think that's why he's in a tier to himself. Talent, situation, system, everything kind of fits for him.
I like what you said there because you look at a guy like Saquon Barkley who had a couple years where he didn't live up to expectations, but he was one of these all-time great prospects, and you still see him. I know he had a great season last year, but you still see him as a top 5 running back, even despite being 5 years into the league, despite having some injuries and some inconsistency, even wearing down a little bit last season. So Bijan Robinson, very safe. And I like to get out ahead of this. These talented running back prospects like this. If I was ranking him over the last decade, he would probably rank right behind Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott for me. So the talent, the floor is there as long as he stays healthy, in this Arthur Smith volume heavy offense. I like the offensive lines improving. I like the scheme. So easily for me, Dynasty RB1. And you know what? I really was laughing at the underdog ranking of having him at RB2 and ADP. I was kind of laughing it off like, how is this possible? But the more I think about it, the more I kind of like it this year, right behind CMC, RB2, RB3, just I love the volume.
I mean, the volume's going to be there. And then, like, one of my good friends and co-host, Jeff Bell, wrote a spotlight for them. And he's like, and as he was going through the spotlight and as they're reading it, like everything just it sets into place that he's going to get the volume, and volume is king. That's why, like, we'll talk about Najee Harris later. But like everybody's saying, oh, Harris is bad. I don't care. He's going to get volume, man. Like that's what we look for in fantasy. And then this is where it is. And then with Atlanta's quarterback situation, the way it looks, they're going to lean on Bijan heavy, right? And so like if he's an underdog, he's running back 2, I get it. I saw him go running back 1 recently in a draft, and I understand it because you're looking at presumed volume, and that's what you look for.
Yeah, I just think everything lines up for Bijan Robinson. I guess the only concern I might have is the offense itself. Maybe the touchdowns may not be there, but we will find out. The next one here is another consensus pick, Breece Hall at RB2. This is if he didn't get injured last year, I think he was on pace to be heading toward being the RB1 this season, ahead of Bijan Robinson, because we would have been able to see it first. But Breece Hall tears that ACL. And I always think it's a kind of a big deal for running backs because, really have such a short career window for the most part anyway, being productive. You're looking at that, even the best guys, 4, 5 years, 6 years, that's maxing it out essentially. So, losing one of those big years, I think kind of, puts him down just a little bit, but I still think the sky is the limit. Do you have any concerns about him going, forward this season? Obviously the long-term outlook, you'd like having him at RB2.
I understand the concerns with the ACL, but it was a clean ACL tear. So like when I was going through just going through, researching and looking at how does he clean ACL tears look? Jeff Mueller does it really well. He lives out here next to me, does stuff for Ray and Ray GQ at Destination Debbie. And he looks at it and he's like, hey, I'm not scared of this. I think he can bounce back. I think that, he's ahead of progressions there. And then we're looking at that position. Like I love him in that offense too. Like he's the guy, he's the bell cow. He can be that 3-down guy as well. I think Breece might be one of those things where like the first couple weeks, little slow to come back. People might be nervous. Maybe they kind of limit the usage a little bit, but then yeah, he's right back in there. And like to your point about the beginning part, I wish Breece would have been healthy because Breece was healthy because I think that would have been a fun debate. Him or Bijan, who do you want? Because I do think he's in that tier if he's there, and we could see Breece. Like with my tiers right now, Breece is in my second tier right behind Bijan, but we could see Breece get in that tier 1 if he comes out strong towards the end of that middle of the end of the year and he leads people to championships. Like maybe we'll get back into that category. So he's a fun one, especially with his ADP. Because in some leagues he's going as like running back 4 in dynasty drafts. So like that's a lot of fun in terms of like, hey, maybe you can use him. And I'm not as concerned with his knee injury as some of these other guys.
Yeah, I just always end up fading running backs coming off of an ACL injury. That's just what I do. But
Yeah.
I love him in dynasty purposes. I just think he might start off, he might have a hard time getting, being an RB1, top 10 guy this year, just based on maybe a slower start to the season. So I'm not drafting him in a ton of redraft, bet my underdog leagues or anything like that. But the sky's the limit long term. In 2024, I think we see him get right back to it for sure. Next up here, another consensus pick. Then we start getting a little bit different here. Jonathan Taylor at the number 3. I think, we saw the talent, just a couple of seasons ago. He was, the RB1 in fantasy football. Last year, down year. I think we see it, the RPO with Anthony Richardson, Nick Sirianni. I think that could be scary. I think they're going to lean on him this year. Nyheim Hines isn't there anymore. We could see a little bit more passing work as well. What are your feelings on his 2023 season and maybe his outlook going forward too?
Yeah, I look at Jonathan as like a just because running backs are so hard. Like, and when you're trying to like project, for fantasy and in terms of like dynasty, I like him this year and next year. Like to me, if you're taking Jonathan Taylor in a draft and you're looking at how to build him, I'm looking at for 2 years. Like, okay, how does that look? But when you look at his usage, I mean, he was a top 8 running back in usage, like 8th in expected points per game, 4th in touches per game. I don't see that really going down because I do think that they're going to utilize him in the rushing attack, the RPO, and everything that they like to do, especially in Steichen's offense. So I like that. The one thing that held him back was he didn't really score any touchdowns. He had 4 last year. So if he can get utilized there, I think there is some concern about Anthony Richardson getting used in the red zone. So like that is something, that's something to kind of look at. But with Taylor, like I'm all aboard for this year, next year. I think that he is a very solid asset. He's one that you can use, and he's not someone that if you draft this year, you're not going to be able to get off of him in terms of dynasty value because I do think he holds those 2 years. So yeah, I'm all aboard on the Taylor train. I think. To me, like when you're looking at anchor running backs, these guys are still anchor running backs, guys you build your roster around. If you want to take a running back early, these are the guys to do it with.
And, I just want to give Jamie is a great listener, and he always joins on these live broadcasts. And, my screen's like frozen on the side for some reason over here. So I didn't actually get to see the comments coming in for a moment. So Jamie, thanks for being patient. Sorry I didn't give you a shout out earlier, my friend. Thanks for always joining us. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor, I think he gets right back to it this season. I guess I feel like the floor is a little bit, we see Nick Sirianni, we see Anthony Richardson coming in. I like I think Jonathan Taylor is very safe to produce. I love him. Just, if I was picking a guy most likely to finish in the top 5, maybe outside of Christian McCaffrey, it would be Jonathan Taylor. I guess my concern is, I just feel like, a guy like Anthony Richardson, if he hits on his outlier end of outcomes, if he's successful, I think, those kind of guys maybe cap a running back's upside. We see them, Jalen Hurts, these running quarterbacks can, be good for running backs. They're fine. They can be, top 10, top 12. We see that J.K. Dobbins is another guy, but I just feel like that upper high end of outcomes may be out of Jonathan Taylor's reach if Anthony Richardson's vulturing some touchdowns and things like that. So the next up here is where we get a little bit different. I think you had Christian McCaffrey. I need to pull back up your rankings, but you have Christian McCaffrey. Where in your rankings again? I think a little bit lower than I do.
Oh man, now you're calling me out here. Let me check real quick. I don't have him too low. I have him right after this. So like Christian McCaffrey, I have at 5. I have Gibbs at 4.
Oh, okay. I have Christian McCaffrey at 5 too. I think we just disagree, or maybe on the next couple. So Christian McCaffrey, I think, I'm sure you might feel the same way here. easily the RB1 coming into this year. I have some small concerns about Elijah Mitchell, maybe taking some carries. And I guess my biggest concern is when I look at San Francisco's schedule, it's, I'm looking at the NFC West not being as competitive. I'm seeing, when I was just breaking it down, there were some teams I could see them getting out ahead of early and then maybe just coasting to a lead, playing Elijah Mitchell, not really forcing things with Christian McCaffrey, who is a little bit older. So what's your outlook on 2023? And I know he's kind of getting that dangerous age for dynasty fantasy football players too.
Man, he's almost 27. I think he's 27 in this next month. Like he's going to start
40.
season.
That's 40 in dynasty years.
You might as well just shoot his ass. You might as well just take him out and get rid of him. Like that's how dynasty looks at that. But no, I think from my perspective with him, I wrote about him in here. I said he's a prime target for dynasty managers who are going to like construct a win now team, or you go get him, right? Like when you're looking at his ability and what he can do, I just think if you want an immediate impact kid that's going to do that, that's Christian McCaffrey. Like last year from week 8 on, he averaged 19.5 points per game. And then he also averaged nearly 20 touches. So you saw that. And in non-blowout games, like you mentioned, 76% average snap share. So he had a high snap share. You saw him get usage. And I think he's going to still get that, right? That quarterback position is, we don't know what the hell is going on with that quarterback position right now with Lance and Purdy and Darnold. So they are going to lean on McCaffrey. It's just the thing is with McCaffrey, I feel like in Dynasty, if you have him, if you draft him or if you take him this year, he's one of those guys who's more than likely going to finally finish on your team if you keep him throughout the year. Like, and he might just be that guy that you're willing to let just die on your roster, so to speak, like Kelsey and maybe Cooper Kupp is like that for some out there, because at a certain point, that age cliff is too much of an age cliff. And there is that, but there is still value to him. Like if he comes out next year and you still have that solid, like let's say maybe he, finishes a low end running back 1 and a high end running back 1 this year and a low end running back next year, like you're okay with that, like with what the value is, but you have to construct a roster that fits what he's going to be. And you need to know that you got to win now. And you can, because in dynasty leagues, I don't know if you noticed this, but no one wants to win the first year. Everybody wants to win the 8th year when the league's not around anymore. So like you can still build it. You can still do it. It's just, you need to have like that roster construction in mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I listen to some dynasty podcasts and I'm wondering if these people actually even play in any leagues, because they talk about like Austin Ekeler being a sell this year. Even like I mentioned, I heard one podcast talking about earlier in the offseason before he was getting cut, like Dalvin Cook being a sell this year. It's just like those guys were sells at 2 years ago, maybe a season ago. But in dynasty, yes, the way that dynasty managers treat these running backs, Christian McCaffrey's well past the sell point already. Yes. If you draft him now, if he's on your team now, you might as well ride it with him, because nobody's going to give you big time value, the proper value for Christian McCaffrey or any of these running backs who are really 4 years into the league, I would say. So that's a great point.
Yeah.
And next up, though, I have, and I know you have him a bit lower in your rankings, which I don't get it. Like I'm driving up the Kenneth Walker train here, having him at RB5. I think you have him closer to 8 or 9 here in these rankings. Yeah. But I don't get it. When I look at these two, Kenneth Walker is almost better at everything than Zach Charbonnet, in my opinion. He is a dog. And I think, he was productive as a pass catcher. I don't think he really got a chance at Michigan State in college, but he was productive as a pass catcher last year when given the opportunity. He was running a high percentage of routes at the end of the season. And I just don't see, I think the Seahawks will see kind of the error of their ways when these guys are out there on the field, when these guys are practicing. I think Kenneth Walker going to get the line. I still think he's going to get, I don't see his workload really decreasing from last year. I think Zach Charbonnet, more of a change of pace guy. And, the offenses the way they are, every running back has a split backfield essentially. So, I just don't see this as a huge detriment to Kenneth Walker. I see this more as a, Zach Charbonnet. I just don't really see a place for him, especially maybe fantasy football these first couple of years. What are your feelings, though? I know you're a little bit more down.
Yeah, I mean, I have him in my, so when I go through my tiers, I have him in my tier 4 with Etienne and Barkley. It's not that I'm down on him. I still like him probably more than others. Like realistically, his freaking stock, I just looked at like ADP recently, DLF's ADP and Superflex. It is just falling down. Like, look at that. You can see it right there in terms of sleepers ADP. Like,
yeah, I know. It's crazy, right? I had to scroll so far down. I was just like, what is happening here?
And that's the thing. Like, I think that at this point he's a buy, right? Because if you're looking at where his value is at, like, I don't mind taking a shot at him. I still included Ken Walker as like an anchor running back. I think the question is like Charbonnet, like, I've watched Charbonnet play for 4 years. Being in Dev, he also has a Michigan fan, so I watched him there. Like, he did post the 5th highest PFF receiving grade and receptions per game. So when you look at like an analytical profile of Charbonnet, he does do things well. But when you watch the film, this is where you get in the film and analytics debate. The film wise, like, he's not running routes. He's basically Ken Walker as far as like as a receiver. Like, I don't see that much of a negligible difference between either one from a film based perspective. So like, that's the thing. Like, who do you want on the field? Probably your best player. And to me, it's Ken Walker. Like, when I'm looking at like who wants to get the usage, I just hate that they drafted him because this really kind of screws up the ceilings for both of these guys. I think that's the big thing. Like, if you draft Walker, you're looking at now. But again, when we talk about running backs, both of these dudes are just one sprained ankle away from top 5 usage. And so that's where you're like, so you're basically, it's a crapshoot. Like, I don't think anybody really truly knows between these guys. But if you take Walker right now at his current ADP, I actually really like that because he could be an elite value talent. We saw the usage. We saw him do it at the NFL level. And if Charbonnet gets a little banged up, man, Walker's right there, top 3 guy based on usage and volume. So that's how I kind of look at these guys. I'm not a big Charbonnet guy either. I never really have been, but I do think that they're going to eat into it. And it's really who's going to get that red zone work and then maybe who's going to score that touchdown.
You know, I do like another point that you made there is Zach Charbonnet could end up being, if Kenneth Walker gets hurt any week, all of a sudden you do have a guy is he a top 12 running back, in that offense, you know what I mean? Just to toss in RB1 just any week that Kenneth Walker missed. So it's a very perplexing backfield. I do understand that. I just see major difference level in the talent, just like in my watching these two guys play a little bit, going back and watching Zach Charbonnet, some of the game film, watching Kenneth Walker. I just see, even watching him at, and okay? You say Ken Walker. Just a real funny side note, really quick. I know there was stuff that last year he wanted to be called Ken. Now I hear people going back to Kenneth. Is it Ken Walker?
Yeah, I just say Ken Walker because that's
I don't know.
So football guys, we have kind of like a good friend Clayton Gray, who's the general manager. He's a stickler on grammar and how you write, and he says Ken Walker, so I say Ken Walker because he's my boss, and that's just how it works. That's just how it goes.
That's usually how it goes. I understand. People have always messaged me. I work for Matt Kelly at Player Profiler. They're just like, "Do you see what Matt said?" I'm just like, he's, he lights the Twitter world on fire always. And I love it. I love it over there. Jamie checking in too. I got Walker in the 5th round.
Perfect.
Startup. That's stealing.
Yeah.
That's stealing, my good sir. Gosh. And a startup too, and a dynasty startup. I know it has to be a super flex league, but that's still insane. Next up at number 6, Jahmyr Gibbs. You have him at 4. I have him a bit lower. I have him as my RB8. And my just reasoning is, and I know it's kind of an arbitrary line, it's not even that he's very far off either, an off season of working out and you could be there. But, you look at the top 24 running backs last year, 20 of them were over 205 pounds. So, I just look at it, being rushing, opportunity being the biggest driver of running back production in fantasy football. Is he always going to get that? Not everybody gets these Austin Ekeler, Christian not even pass catching running backs like Jahmyr Gibbs, profile wise over history. Not a lot of these guys get this Austin Ekeler, Christian McCaffrey receiving role to propel them into this, DeAndre Swift, and he's been healthy. So, I know, you obviously, and I love the draft capital that almost, quelled any concerns that I have. Number 12 is ridiculous. So obviously the Lions have big plans for him, but does that concern you at all going forward?
I think when you look at like I'm pretty aggressive with Gibbs's ranking, partly because of the way the landscape is, right? Like, especially like when we look at here, like McCaffrey and Taylor, they might be dead to fantasy manager next year. And now Gibbs is right there. And so like, one thing I try to do in my rankings too is projection a little bit too, like where their value could be. So if you have him at running back 8, but I have him at running back 4, maybe I can go trade for him with you because I know that you value him a little different than I do. And so that's how I kind of try to do it too. I think, looking at Gibbs, Swift last year was really efficient when he had when he was healthy. 4th in fantasy points per touch, 3rd in carries, those type of things. And when you look at projections, and I'm kind of going through some of our projection of football guys, even if he gets like a 50-50 split with Monty and whatever the case may be, he's still probably looking at like 224 touches. And that's pretty good for an efficient guy that can catch the way he can. And I also like the fact that, like, if Jameson Williams is out for suspension, they're going to get him involved more in the passing game as well. There's probably going to be opportunities for both these guys to be on the field at the same time. And so when I look at that, I just think he's going to get the touches, right? And then if he maybe gets up to like 55 60% split, you could be looking at 250 touches for him. And you know what it is? Touches equals fantasy points. And that's where I'm at with Gibbs. And I think that's there. Plus, I'm not a Monty guy. I think Monty is not very good. So like I think that talent's gonna overweigh that. And you and me both know too. The people want to be proven right. They took Gibbs where they took him, and they need to use him because they got a lot of crap on social media, and I think that the usage is going to be there just because of where they drafted him.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be pressured. I mean, they got a hard time for those first round picks, taking like a middle linebacker and a running back and a tight end with their like first 3 picks in the draft. That's throwing like positional analysis and value out the window. Detroit Lions doing their own thing a little bit there. So we'll see. We love the Lions coming in. They made some mistakes, but I still think the offense is going to be very powerful. So Jahmyr Gibbs in a very good spot to produce. Up next is Travis Etienne in these rankings. And, he's right behind Christian McCaffrey for you, I believe, as the RB6. And, I guess, I'm really a big fan of Travis Etienne. I guess my only biggest concern last year was, he only had, I believe, 4 games over 3 targets. I believe I have that stat written down. And, just the receiving work, didn't necessarily materialize. Maybe he wasn't as an adept route runner as we gave him credit for, just looking at those numbers in college. Maybe a lot of that maybe with some screen pass and things like that. What's your feelings on Travis Etienne going forward? I'm not that concerned about Tank Bigsby in the same breath of Zach Charbonnet. I just don't think he's in the same class as Travis Etienne. More of an off-pace guy, maybe going to vulture a couple touchdowns that we don't want, probably just being that very physical profile. But obviously, you still have him very high in your rankings.
Yeah, I mean, so the hard part with Etienne for me is like, and I have him in like in the risk tier. So I call it the risk tier. I have Etienne and Walker and Barkley. So I have him in that tier. And if I can tier up to get any of these other guys, I definitely would with Etienne. That's kind of how I look at that. It's hard because, after he kind of came back, he was running back 8 points last year per game, and he averaged about 15 fantasy points per game towards the end of the year. I think the thing is, and this is what kills me, I'm going to be honest with you. Like when I see it out there, if I see one more person on social media tell me that Etienne had a great receiving profile coming out of college, I'm going to lose my damn mind. No, he didn't. Like he did not. He was not a good receiver. And he came back his senior year just to become a better receiver. And you know what that meant? That meant they were force feeding the shit out of him on screens and all this stuff. If you watch that Clemson offense that year, which really struggled, a lot of that production came from just force feeding Etienne in bad situations. And also he struggled with drops. He was not a very good pass catcher. Tank Bigsby is a better pass catcher. I will say that undoubtedly, as someone who's watched Tank and both these guys, Tank is a more fluid pass catcher. So I think that's my hesitation. It comes down to, like you mentioned, it's just going to come down to the freaking red zone touchdowns. Who's going to get those red zone touchdowns? And Etienne really hasn't gotten that, right? Like when we look at like kind of what his usage and look like, I think that it really comes down to that. Where those touchdowns come from, I'm a little worried about Etienne. Plus, you're looking at Ridley being there now, and then you have Ingram. You have all these guys coming back. Where's that volume? Where's that usage going to be? I just think the target's going to be down across the board from the running back room. And so that's what concerns me. So I understand the concern. I just have him here because of perceived value as well. Like if he does get in there, again, a lot of these guys are ankle injury away, like I talked about, getting that usage. But yeah, he is the biggest concern I have in this top 7 that we have right here. Like he is the one I'm probably worried about the most.
And I like that take. That's a very interesting take. And you're a Devi guy, so I really trust that analysis there. Tank Bigsby being a better pass catcher. That's interesting. And I was alluding to that too. Travis Etienne getting a lot of those screen passes. Like I said, people just looking at that stat sheet, seeing the receiving production and being like, he must be a very good receiving back. And, and I think fantasy managers have been finding out last year that isn't necessarily the case. So that's, that could drive down some of that PPR upside. Next up, though, is a guy who used to have a lot of PPR upside. That is Saquon Barkley. He is still an adept pass catcher. But, one of my things with Saquon Barkley is just the decline in receiving, finally put together a healthy season last year. That was great to see. And, he finished as a top 5 running back as a result, but still you're looking at it, that receiving production declining, especially looking at that freshman season. he's never been particularly an efficient rusher. He's never exactly put it together. And, we're this far in now, and I just don't know if we're ever going to see that Saquon Barkley season like that, like building off that rookie season that he had. So what's your feelings on Saquon Barkley? I feel kind of, I just don't know who else to rank behind him. So, I feel kind of gross having him this high when I do. I think he was my RB. I think I have him as my RB6. Yeah, RB6. And it feels kind of, I almost want to go closer to your ranking. I just think he really could deliver some strong production the next season or two, considering the volume that he's going to get. So, I'm a little bit scared to rank Saquon Barkley this high. Like, I even was breaking down a little bit in the latter half of 2022. So I see that you have him a little bit further down in your rankings.
I have him at 8. So generally speaking, where he's at, but I think, or wait, maybe I don't, maybe a little lower, but like I have him at a tier of like uncertainties there. I think the question with Barkley is, does he sign his tender? Is he gonna go play? Is he gonna play on his contract? Does he want a new one? Because if he gets out there, he had 352 touches last year. That's a shit ton of touches. So when you're looking at it, that's the volume you mentioned. Like he's gonna get that. I look at Barkley a little similar to like where I look at with McCaffrey, in terms of like, you're looking at this year, if you draft Barkley, you're looking for, okay, he's going to get those red zone touches. He's going to have those because the volume is going to be there. He had 10 touchdowns last year, which is really good in terms of what you're looking for in the red zone. He had some efficient games. He had some inefficient games. He had some targets. I mean, towards the end of the year, I think he had I think it was like 20 something targets the last 3 games. So if he can do that, we're going to see that volume go up. They didn't really add anybody that you're like, oh my gosh, they added this to the roster. I like Eric Gray from Oklahoma. I think he's a fun stash later, especially if the Barkley situation doesn't go in that play. But as far as Dynasty goes, it's hard because, we have him here next year. He's probably running back 18, in my opinion. Like he's going to be somewhere in that area. So if you draft him, it's based on value and based on, okay, am I going to go try to win my league? And that's how I have to look at Barkley. That's the hard part with Barkley.
And I have a lot of guys like that. I'm like riding the line. Like I'm literally like the running back landscape is so bare that I'm just like, I'm ranking this guy for this season. Like I have Aaron Jones in these rankings. Just guys like players like that, Joe Mixon. It's essentially for this season. Like I could see them being totally fallen out this year. The wheels fall off. So I have a lot of guys like that just one season, but that's the nature of the running back position. We didn't get that rejuvenation that 2023 was supposed to bring to the running back position, the rookie class. Yeah. That didn't happen. So, oh man, I can't tell you how, I've done so many podcasts on just like, I compared the 2023 draft class to the Hindenburg. I mean, it is this nitrogen balloon up in the sky, just completely falling down on fire. So or helium. I don't know. It's nitrogen, helium, something or other. Something catches on fire, and that's the 2023 rookie draft class, in my opinion. But that's a conversation for another day. We will move on here, and we've talked more in depth about the top 10 guys. I'm not going to keep, I'm going to keep this down to an hour. So, as we get out of the top 12, I'll probably just start hitting on some of these big names, but we will continue on here. Josh Jacobs at the RB9 spot, finally getting a little bit of recognition. 2,000 per all-purpose yard season will do that, but it still feels like, is there any player that could generate less excitement out of 2,000 all-purpose yards than Josh Jacobs? Fantasy managers just hate Josh Jacobs. Is that right?
They do. I mean, so like I have them in this tier. So I named this tier the money making tier because it's all these old dudes. And if they hit, you're like, hey, I won an ADP because this dude just had, 327 fantasy points and finished his running back 3 where I drafted him. And I think last year he's probably what you could argue Jacobs was the most valuable asset anybody owned last year, like just based on ADP and value and where he was there. I don't know. I just don't know what to do with him because he's got a franchise tag. He's had some issues off the field. Like, so, what if that happens again? That's going to tank his value. He's sitting there at 25 moving forward. What does that look like? I just think this year, yeah, absolutely. Like he's going to get that usage, especially with that quarterback position. It is just not good. So if he gets that, especially with Waller moving on, these other guys, they don't necessarily have the weapons in that offense. But again, just like all these dudes, they're all 1-year guys, Emerson. Well, we're just talking about 1-year guys here in Dynasty, which is scary.
And it's so interesting to me. I was getting him at RB30 last year at underdog leagues, RB33, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So absolutely insane. So I think, we'll be trying to find those values later, but last year, and you could certainly see it where he just goes kind of back to where he was before, kind of, middling kind of volume, not necessarily getting that receiving work. So Josh Jacobs, a very polarizing player for 2023 leagues. Up next, Rhamondre Stevenson. This is a guy I just never know how to feel about. Like, where does he fall in your rankings? Right behind Saquon Barkley, so pretty similar right here. So I just, I guess my concern is, his role. He's very elusive. Especially for being a big guy, he's very elusive, a dead pass catcher, but he has that frame to be a goal line, kind of back that. But just where does he fit in the New England offense? Because I know that he's going to do something, but the New England Patriots love to pigeonhole players into roles. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they have all these pass catchers on the back. You could see Rhamondre Stevenson somehow reverting into an early down role and having some of these pass catching backs that they have on the roster kind of sneaking out there. So I just don't know. I guess my only concern is the New England Patriots, and the draft capital, which, this far removed from the draft doesn't concern me that much, drafted in the 4th round. But Rhamondre Stevenson, very talented player. And I think he could get a little bit more goal line work. I'm just a little bit worried about the Patriots. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little bit more worried about like Ty Montgomery in the pass catching role. Like they've been talking about him all offseason of like, hey, yeah, we love this guy in that receiving role, that 3rd down role. That would screw Stevenson's overall volume and value. And I think that, and I like Pierre Strong as well. But everything I keep hearing is Ty Montgomery. Could you imagine Ty Montgomery stealing the hopes and dreams of all these guys? I like that Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator, so we're going to see that. But I think the thing with him, which is if you have him, you're excited about, is that he did not convert very many like runs inside the 10-yard line. I think that he only scored 3 times with 19 red zone carries within the 10-yard line. So if we see a positive regression, we're, oh, wow, he's going to score touchdowns now. We're excited about that overall. To me in Dynasty, he's a sell to me. Like I've been a big proponent of this. If you can sell him, you'd be excited about it. I know I saw a deal, Rhamondre and Matthew Stafford for CJ Stroud. So in Superflex, if you can go get one of those elite rookie quarterbacks by pairing him maybe with an older asset with Rhamondre, I think that's the move you make, especially trying to kind of retool your Dynasty league and everything there. And I think that's kind of what you look for with Rhamondre.
Yeah, he's exactly the classic running back that I usually try to sell on, just not an overall elite, profile, not a super elusive, great athlete, although he is very elusive in the open field. There's a lot to like about Rhamondre, but just players like that going into their 2nd year, running backs have such short career windows. We see guys, who would look amazing, then the wheels just fall off right away. So, just the nature of that position, Rhamondre Stevenson, a classic guy that I would be looking to move on from as well in Dynasty leagues. And, Austin Ekeler comes in at number 11. I feel like we know what we're seeing with Austin Ekeler at this point. You know what I mean? Could he finish as the RB1 this season? Absolutely. Getting older. Is he going, I guess I'll stop really quick. Do you see Austin Ekeler, do you see him aging gracefully here as the wheels, is he another guy that you could see just the wheels falling off this year? Or do you think because it's a pass catching role that he has, he scores a lot of touchdowns too? Do you see him, maybe be able to do it for another 2 or 3 seasons?
Yeah, no, I think he's the guy that you would target later that you'd be comfortable with 2 to 3 years, right? And you're okay with that because like he led all running backs in receptions and targets last year, boosted his fantasy numbers. You see the touchdowns there. This year, I think he's still one of their best weapons. And I mean, they drafted Quentin Johnson, but Allen and Mike Williams have never, shown to be healthy. If he moves on to next year, that's the question. Is like, where is he going to be after this year? Where does that contract look like? Will he move on? But I think that his game definitely translates pretty well moving forward as like someone who can be a pass catcher and in a running back too. It doesn't take much to be a running back too. And if you draft him right now, he's kind of in that late running back 1-2 area anyway. So it's a pretty good and safe investment.
Yeah, what I worry about for 2020, and I just cannot. I just always mess up. See, I need somebody handling these graphics and everything, as I try to talk and put these players up. But I guess my concern is just, Kellen Moore being the offensive coordinator now. Is he going to be throwing down the field a little bit more, not necessarily targeting Austin Ekeler on checkdowns? And, Austin Ekeler has got insane touchdown efficiency. And, maybe that stays the same, where's that, that's going to be his role probably again. But, just being that reliant on touchdowns is a little bit of a concern too. And, I'll start skipping around a little bit after this, but Najee Harris is one guy I wanted to get your feelings on a little bit.
Yeah.
I like Najee Harris a lot. I think he had a Lisfranc sprain at the beginning of last year. That was, that's very painful. Had hampered him majority of the season. And then as we got down there, I have the stat right here. I think he finishes a top 15 running back 4 out of the last 5 weeks. started regaining that, started getting a lot more of that work, started taking that back from Jaylen Warren. I thought that was ridiculous last season. Just like, who is Jaylen Warren? What do you mean? He's not taking the lion's share of this backfield away from Najee Harris. So I'm glad. I think you had him. Where was he in your rankings? I think you had him fairly high.
Yeah.
No, maybe not very high.
I mean, generally I have him in the same tier with like Rhamondre,
A little bit
Ekeler,
lower.
Jacobs, and those guys. Yeah, I have him in there. But to your credit, to your point, yeah, no, I think so too. Like towards the end of the year, he averaged 20 plus carries in that second half because he got healthy. And I see a lot of stuff too going out like about like his, some of his advanced stats don't look very good, but it's hard because when you're looking at it, that offensive line was really, really bad. And they needed a facelift for that offensive line, and they've done that. I thought that, Isaac Similo, really good, 3-year, contract they gave him. I think that's going to be really, really good for him. James Daniels, I think, can step up and be a better guard when you're looking at it. Mason Cole, I think, hey, is he going to be kind of developed? So, like, we're seeing a lot of development from their offensive line, and that'll be really good for Najee.
And yeah, this offense is going to be great. I still think, yeah, we're going to see the product of that. Obviously, that first year, his rookie season was maybe an outlier. Big Ben just like so scared of getting tackled after getting beaten up his whole career, to his credit, not discrediting his toughness. But yeah, he was done getting tackled that final year, and just it was check down to Najee Harris. That probably won't happen again, but I still think he'll be a product of a better offense. We'll skip Nick Chubb as our 13th ranked player. I think we know about Nick Chubb. He could have his best season yet because of the departure of Kareem Hunt, but he's a volatile asset. That significant knee injury back in college, you could see kind of the wheels fall off at any point, and it wouldn't surprise me. We'll stop on Tony Pollard just for a moment. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. We saw that significant fibula. Was it a fibula fracture? Am I misquoting that?
Yeah, it was a pretty significant injury.
Yeah, significant. And then you saw, I know he started taking care of that backfield, but he had some big games in the middle of the year, but we still have not seen him kind of take that role and run with it and be successful over a period. So there's still a certain amount of risk, although who else is in the Cowboys backfield at this moment? So what's your outlook? Do you think he can continue this forward? I know he's already 4 years into the league. So do you think he can have a nice window of production here for the next 2 or 3 seasons?
I don't think 2 or 3. Like if you like Pollard and you're like, hey, I think that he can be that guy for this year, I understand it. But I don't know. Like, I know he's a very good runner. He was top 25 in touches per game. People need to understand, though, Kellen Moore's not there. And I do think that they use him pretty well with Moore. And in this new offense that they're going to run, like, I just don't see, I think the plays per game is going to be down. I think the offense efficiency is going to be down. So I just don't know how much we're going to really see him like consistently get the usage that you like. That's, I think, my biggest question is, and as a Dallas fan, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of a jaded Dallas fan. Like, the offensive staff that they're putting together there, Schottenheim and everything that's there, I just worry about that usage. And I think they are going to throw a little bit more, play action, try to get those involved. And there is a chance that the Cowboys still go get a running back, not draft, but like go get a veteran guy out there. I know Des Bryant was talking about boy Derrick Henry yesterday on social media, got everybody upset. But like, I think that there's a chance they do that, which eats into that. Like, Pollard to me is the biggest sell out there. I don't know if Pollard's going to be on this team next year. I mean, he got his 1 year. You're going to look at that. Like, to me, like I'm in running back mindset. Like, I'm going to sell this guy to someone that really truly believes in him.
He's a very, very polarizing player. It's very tough to put, and I really trust your analysis on it. And I see he's a little bit lower down your rankings as well. So yeah, a little bit trepidatious myself. Javonte Williams is another very polarizing player. I don't know much, I'm not a medical expert, but, people speculate these knee injury was extra, little extra significant. So just judging off running backs in the past, it's hard for me to buy into 2023, he had everything I wanted last season, except for the mess that was a Denver offense. I was drafting him on underdog. I was pounding the table. People were, when Melvin Gordon got added, there was a lot of people who were, he was a polarizing player last season too. I was all in on Javonte Williams last season. There was people who questioned whether he would get that significant amount of work. He had the receiving work. He had the opportunity share. He didn't have any touchdowns last year. Then of course he suffered that significant knee injury. So, what's your future outlook on Javonte Williams, a guy who, part of an offense that is, it's hard to gauge how that offense is going to be, Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. So what's your outlook on Javonte Williams going forward?
Yes. So to me, and we have some people at Football Guys that talk about his injuries a lot, and they're just worried about that knee. And to me, that's not a risk I'm willing to take right now. I'm gonna wait. Like for Javonte, I'll wait till week 7. Right? He hasn't played very much, kind of like Dobbins last year, where it's like, oh, maybe he starts on the pup. I mean, I know there's rumors that he's not going to, but we also heard that about J.K. last year. And the thing with Javonte is like, I like Javonte as a talent. I don't like his value still. I'll wait till later. I'll wait till week 6, 7, like when a manager's getting really scared, and I'm gonna go pounce on that value and try to go grab him then, and then I'm okay with that. Like I tell people always DM me about this stuff, and I tell everybody like, don't hate who the player is. I mean, you could be concerned about the knee. If you're gonna write him off because of the knee, that's fine. I don't mind that. But like, just care about the value in the ADP right now, and that's how I look at it. And I still think Javonte is going to be less valuable like at the beginning of the year when you can go pounce and really buy him. Right now, I still think people are believing in all the positive reports and all that kind of stuff. So go get him later. That's how I look at him. And I look at him more as a 2024 asset.
Yeah, exactly. I don't buy it. I think of course, you can be out there practicing in shorts in June. That doesn't tell me very much. I think traditionally, you'll see him start off slow. And I think, just considering, it could be a lot like J.K. Dobbins last season. And
Yeah.
even Javonte Williams suffered that knee injury a lot late, about a month, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I'm kind of just guessing here later than J.K. Dobbins did. So, that extra timetable could push him back, more into 2024. As you said, J.K. Dobbins was next up in our rankings. I'm going to gloss just over him really quick. My big concern about him, just that lack of receiving work, Lamar Jackson getting some of those touchdowns. But somebody, I feel Baltimore offense still going to be rushing a lot. Probably a pretty safe bet to finish as a good RB2. I can't stop on all these guys, but J.K. Dobbins, I just wanted for a second. You look at those efficiency metrics last year; they were fantastic. What's your outlook on J.K. Dobbins? I'm curious.
I'm all aboard the J.K. Dobbins trains this
Okay,
year.
I was
Like
curious.
last year, I wasn't. Like same with Javonte. I was like, at the beginning, I was like, hey, don't buy him yet. Don't do that. But I'm on it, and the reason why. So I'm extremely late on my next article is because I'm just being a lazy ass. But I'm writing a spotlight on Lamar. In this offense and Todd Monken's offense, his ability to use their running backs in the screen game and how he utilizes that. Think of Kenny McIntosh, think of James Cook, all of these different ways, and his zone gap and a lot of his RPOs and everything that we've seen elevate him. Like that Georgia offense with that running back position, all aboard this train. I think Dobbins going to get the usage. I like him in this Todd Monken's offense. I'm all aboard Dobbins. I think that his ADP is still criminally low, and I think he's a great ad right now buy in Dynasty.
And another guy that you're high on that I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on, because you have him a lot higher than most people do. DeAndre Swift. You must see a little bit of a resurgence here.
I'm just a Swift. I'm gonna go down with that train. I think.
Okay.
I think that he finds himself in a really good offense, and I do think that he can be a Miles Sanders running back too, and he's not getting valued that way. And if that's the case, then I'm all aboard. I put him in that money making tier because if he hits at his ADP right now, I do think that he can I think he can win you leagues. And if he stays healthy, he's one of the better backs in the NFL. I still believe that. I'm not getting off that train.
We've seen it. We've seen that crazy receiving work, that kind of that Austin Ekeler, Christian McCaffrey receiving role. We saw it a couple years ago. We've seen it in spurts. He just can't get it together. I'm a little, I guess it's a little concerning that the Lions were just so willing to throw away a talented running back on a rookie contract to draft a running back in the first round again.
Yeah.
Or, he wasn't drafted in the first round, but very high selection still. So that was a little bit concerning. But yes, it's so tantalizing, that PPR upside. Derrick Henry's the next guy on our list. I love him in redraft leagues because people are fading him just a little bit because of the age, but not someone I'm touching in dynasty leagues. And if he falls in drafts, just know that he's only this high because it's probably down to this season. And everything he does from this point is kind of unicorn status at this point. So next up, though, is an interesting player because he's also forgotten about. Joe Mixon. I think the Cincinnati Bengals told us what they think of this legal situation, didn't they?
Yeah.
They took Chase Brown in the 5th round. They let Samaje Perine go. I mean, it's Joe Mixon's field. What they're trying to win a Super Bowl this year. So Joe Mixon's going to be out there. And yeah, I feel like, especially he's at a similar ranking in redraft leagues pretty much. So, I mean, that's a super, decent buy for me. And he's in dynasty leagues. Once again, he's this high because he could have a great 2023 season, right?
Yeah, I mean, people like to look at his beginning of the year last year, and it was not good. But in the games that he was healthy, week 9 to the conference championship, he averaged 16.7 fantasy points per game. That's running back 5. Like, and he had that at the end of that year. I know he had a big blow up game, but even then, he still finished 6 in touches per game, second in carries inside the 10-yard line, and he's going to keep getting that. Who the hell else is going to get in the red zone carries on this team? To me, he is a Leonard Fournette type asset from like a couple years ago. Oh, damn. Mixon just had another running back 5 game. Oh, he had another one, and you're drafting him super late. I think he's a great ad right now. I think the biggest thing for me, too, is that he had his career high in receiving usage, 60 catches for 441 yards, 70 targets. That's something to note, too. Like, he saw some career highs last year. I think Mixon's just the guy that everybody loves to hate. They love to hate him 4 years ago, and then now he started was good, and now it's back. Oh, we hate Mixon again. I think that he's a sneaky guy to grab as like your running back 2 in dynasty startups, and you just have that usage there, and you're excited about it for at least this year. And then next year, maybe he finds his way like Fournette did. Hey, maybe he finds his way to another roster where he can kind of pick up those red zone carries.
Yeah, and some of these running backs like a Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, they have some sneaky value because like they might die on your roster. They're one of those guys who you draft Joe Mixon, no one wants to buy Joe Mixon really. So, but yes, could he sneak in? Would you be surprised to see 2 more RB1 seasons? No, not at all,
No.
really, especially tied to the Bengals. So, well, Miles Sanders is the next player up here, and is there anybody else? Is there anywhere else for this ball to go in the Carolina offense? I mean, Miles Sanders, if he stays healthy, I mean that opportunity share has to be huge, right?
I don't know. I saw someone on Twitter say they have multiple wide receiver 1s on their roster, and then someone quote tweeted it. It
Insane.
said in the XFL. I thought that was pretty funny. No, I think Sanders can be efficient, right? Like when you're looking at Carolina has a good offensive line. When you're looking at what he can be, like Foreman sat at probably like a low end running back 2 in that offense. And, moving forward, what does that look like this year for him? I think he can be. I think he's just going to be efficient. I like Sanders as like a 0 running back target as well. Like they're going to use him. And I know they talked about him utilizing him in the passing attack recently in one of the beat writers that I read, one of the reports there. And I thought he looked good last year. He looked fine. Like I think that you're looking at it, but ADP and value match up for Sanders. So if you're looking at that, like that's the kind of guy to grab late. Especially if you go to 0 running back build, which is everybody's doing right now, and that he's a perfect target for that.
And he has a big contract. He has he's definitely tied to him for 2 seasons. You know what I mean? It's a surprisingly big contract that Miles Sanders got there. So I like that too. Next up, I'm going to gloss over Aaron Jones because I want to really get to this next player. Aaron Jones could be, in line. He could be the wide receiver in quotations 1 for the Green Bay Packers this season. Could be in line for a huge workload. But I was offended by this next one, sir, and you not having this player on your list. I want to hear your thoughts on it because I am a huge fan. He's all the way up to RB16 in my rank. Didn't even find his way on your list. Rachaad White. Explain, break it down for me. I respect your opinion. Why am I so wrong on Rachaad White?
No, I like Rachaad. Like I don't necessarily like. I have him
Your ranking says otherwise.
I have him in tier 8 with Dameon Pierce. Like the thing that I have with him, like they're projected starters, right? But I think their outlook for dynasty is a little murky because Tampa Bay is in the rebuild. What the hell is going on with the quarterback position? How's that going to be looked there? And I think that limits his ceiling, right? Like when you're looking at that. And so you're like, all right, what does that look like going forward? We've seen this kind of historically with these guys. What's that offensive line look like? I don't hate Rachaad. I just don't. I would have him lower in running back area because you're still looking at some of these rookies that could pop off. Devin Achane, you're looking at maybe James Cook has a bigger year. I know people are talking about that. Tajay Spears, Kendre Miller. So like those guys, we know how this works. They pump up their value. They have a couple good games next year. They're shooting ahead of Rachaad and based on value there. I think Rashaad's fine. I have him as a low end running back too. I might be wrong on that. I just don't look at him as being like I don't think he could ever get in those higher tiers. And that's why I kind of value him the way I do.
I just look, I like the very athletic. I loved his production in college. He had some games last year. You saw those 8 and 9 targets. You saw what he was capable of. I think 70 plus targets could be in his range of outcomes. And Jamie's right. It's me. It's Matt Kelly wearing off on me a little bit. Rachaad White is the player profiler darling. So, me listening to player profiler podcast, how could I not start loving Rachaad White. So Jamie telling on me a little bit there. It's true. My love of Rachaad White does probably stem a lot from Player Profiler. That is very true. Next up in these rankings is a player that you had in your rankings pretty fairly high, actually, and that I did not have in my rankings is Cam Akers. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. My biggest concern is, I think he could be in an excellent position this year, but man, that offensive line was rough last year. Did it get a lot better? I know they added an interior lineman in the second round of this year's draft, but if Matthew Stafford in this offense, if Matthew Stafford is not a lot better to elevate this offense this year, I think Cam Akers could be in a little bit of a rough spot. What are your feelings? Oh, can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
My bad.
All good.
My bad. Yeah, I would look at Akers. He's 23. I think that he saw that usage down the stretch, those last 3 games, when you saw him have 100 yards, 3 straight games, even without Stafford being there. So like the way I look at Akers is at this point in a draft, if you're looking at him and you're like, hey, can I get something from him that kind of looks like this? Can I get some usage from him? I have him really high. I'll be honest, like when I'm looking at like my rankings right now, I think that they didn't add anybody, right? I like Zach Evans. I always like Zach Evans as far as the Debbie goes. But again, they didn't add someone with that day 2 capital or even like go after him. He's in a contract year, could see a bunch of usage there. And somebody might like Akers. And undoubtedly, I'm kind of rooting for him because he came back from something that, no one ever comes back from, that Achilles. And we saw that kind of that down the stretch there. Projection is hard. I just think this year for the volume that he could receive and based on how he finished last year, running back 1, like low end running back 1, I'm okay taking the risk on Akers this year. I wasn't last year, but this year after he showed me that, I'm okay a little bit more, a little bit more risk adverse there.
Yeah, he obviously regained a lot of, just as we expected. I mean, the Rams really rushed him back in the playoffs and when they won the Super Bowl. And even last season, you just saw he didn't have the juice. And then, he really regained a lot of that explosion, a year and a half removed from that Achilles injury, which I think should have been expected. So Cam Akers, I think he's very intriguing. Like I said, if the Rams offense is a little better than we're expecting, bounces back a little bit, this is a guy who, he has the talent to be a top 12 running back. So very polarizing player. And last up here, a guy we'll finish up. It's a guy I slipped in on you because you gave me 23 running backs. So I was able to slip in one of my guys here. Dameon Pierce, not really my guy, I should say. I have a lot of concerns about Dameon Pierce, but I just have him here because he showed us a lot of talent. I mean, he showed us some production last year. Not a productive player, particularly in college. Didn't really see. He's not a great athlete, particularly either. Just, got an opportunity and ran with it a little bit, but he did break down a little bit toward the end of the season, didn't play those final few weeks. Dameon Pierce did not make it into your rankings. So, maybe you could have these concerns. I could see him as a guy who has maybe value this year, but could certainly just be drafted over at any point. And, you just see him kind of fall by the wayside. So, obviously you might feel that way as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have him with Rachaad in that tier. I think with him, like Devin Singletary can, last year he was competing against like Rex Burkhead, Mike Boone, some of these other guys. Those are guys who are kind of just guys. Like Devin Singletary has shown that he can at least do something, at least produce out there. And I just think the way that Pierce finished the year, I was really worried about that, right? And the way you look at Dynasty, a guy that I don't think Pierce necessarily again, does he catch a lot of passes? Kinda. You saw a little bit of targets there, when he had it, 39 targets. But with a guy like this who struggles in that receiving profile, doesn't have the draft capital that you necessarily like. They bring in Singletary, who can to definitely eat into his workload. Didn't finish the year out very well. I'm all like, when you're looking at that overall, a lot of red flags, just red flag, red flag, red flag. And again, Houston might be in his position next year where they go after an elite running back to fill around Stroud and get that offense going. And then you're really looking at a dead asset. And that's kind of how I look at Dameon.
Yeah, I have similar feelings about that. One question from one of our listeners here, Jamie, who's always a great listener, like I've always say. RB25 is where I'm thinking about putting Roschon. Where do you have him ranked? Not that high, Jamie, unfortunately. I love Roschon Johnson. I love him. I wanted that day 2 draft capital so badly, but we didn't get it. Chicago Bears, I shouldn't be afraid because, if we love Roschon, Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman are not particularly intimidating backs, but Khalil Herbert, very efficient, lights up all those efficiency metrics that you'd like to see. But Roschon Johnson, just the NFL did tell us a little bit what they think. He's more of an a low-end RB3 for me. There's some guys I just like the immediate opportunity a little bit better and the value that they're going to provide, assured value that they're going to provide this season. Kevin, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, Roshan to me is a 2024 asset. Like, if you really do
Mm-hmm.
believe in him, like, I think maybe he gets it, maybe, right? Like, maybe Foreman and Herbert miss snaps or miss games, and you see Roshan kind of getting in there. I think the real battle, so the one thing you're going to have to look at, Jamie, as we go into like the camp, is can he beat out Foreman in camp? If he does that, then yeah, then we're like, oh, we're a little bit more excited because then he can be that running back 2 in that depth chart, and we see that, right? And I think people are maybe talking Foreman up a little bit too much. I like Foreman, but like I've seen some higher takes on him. So that camp is going to be really important because if he can get out there, improve his pass protection. We saw like his missed tackle rate. I think it was 49%, which was crazy.
Yeah,
obviously, he was
amazing,
playing
crazy.
behind. He was playing behind Bijan, so we saw that. But like he has talent. It's just, can he kind of elevate it? So if he can beat out Foreman, yeah, then we're all on board here. I think 25 is a little high for me where I have him right now. I think he's in my 35 to 40 range. He's kind of in that cluster of like rookie running backs. But yeah, the capital worries me in Dynasty, those type of things. But again, can he beat out Foreman? That's the key.
Yeah, and so like I said, it's a good landing spot. Like I said, Khalil Herbert, Foreman shouldn't be too intimidating for Roshan. But yeah, we'll see. We'll pay attention to him in camp. Yeah, it was a great show. We broke down our top 24 running backs. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me. What are you working on? You want to tell the people about anything you want to shout out real quick?
Yeah, you can follow, my Dynasty work at Football Guys. We do a weekly show over there, the college football show, but it's more of a Dynasty/Devy show. So we cover all of it. And then you can check out our YouTube channels everywhere out. We have our YouTube channel. It keeps growing. We have a Patreon. We have combined Devy Dynasty ranks. We ranked over, I don't know, 150 quarterbacks, 200 running backs, wide receivers, and 150 tight ends. So that you have the combined rankings, all of that. But yeah, you can follow us there. You can follow me on Twitter. If you have any other questions, in terms of Dynasty, you can always DM me.
And yeah, there isn't a kind of a better generator of positive vibes on Twitter than Kevin Du Bois. So, I always appreciate that. And if I'm looking at Devy content, there really isn't anybody better than you and Jeff Bell. I look at you too. I've always seen what you guys think of college prospects because it's always fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me over everywhere pretty much, Player Profiler, the Right Way Sports Network, the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, the Face Off Sports Network. So, I'll be doing podcasts and articles all the time. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and have a great rest of your Sunday, Monday, whenever you're listening to this. We'll see you next time.